I talk to people there, they're afraid of our system. They don't.
Why?
Because what they see is
people go bankrupt for medical bills.
I think we should all, like without a doubt, be on the street doing what we're doing.
Fidel for 50-something years used the embargo as a crutch to keep his people blaming us.
Right.
I've been there.
We ended up making a lot of friends on the island, and we would feed them, bring them to restaurants with us, and they were always kind of scared, you know, because they know that other Cubans are looking at them, because for fear of like a Cuban outing them.
Every time you talk about Cuba in the US, it automatically the conversation gets taken over by our family in Miami.
It's the Cuban government and it's the exile community who have been the loudest voices in this conversation for a long time. We have an opportunity to change that now.
All right, guys, welcome to a LatiNation special. I got a panel discussion that's very close to my heart and is very close to the people who are here, the guests' heart. We're all Cubans, Cuban-Americans. Alex Fumero, Marco Martinez, Dahlia, Jason Canela, and Henri Esteve. A couple of these people are my friends. Some of these people are meeting today for the first time, and we felt that we had to come together to talk about what's going on in Cuba. So I guess what we need to start off is explaining what is going on in Cuba right now. So who wants to take? I got a feeling, Jason, you want to jump out in front and explain what's going on?
Let's do it. There's a big misconception about it being about the embargo. It has absolutely nothing to do with the embargo. We obviously know that. Cuba, the Cuban people have been suffering for over just about 62 years now. And personally, and I'd love to hear you guys' opinion, but I feel like, the exiles, the people that knew what Cuba was before this, they're gone. They've either sadly passed, like my grandparents, or they're just not in Cuba. You know, the Cubans of Cuba today were born in this regime. They don't know. They maybe hear the stories and whatever, but they don't know what Cuba was without that communist regime. And so the pandemic hit everybody hard, Cuba even harder. You know, there has not been a lot coming into the island. So these people are literally starving to death. That's why I believe they took to the streets.
Well, the pandemic was the straw that broke the camel's back, but this was simmering for a while. And it became kind of like the excuse because they are on the streets yelling libertad. They're not yelling for, other things.
Yes, but the only reason why I'm mentioning this is because, as you guys know, the Canal announced that he's going to allow, people to bring food, bring medicine. The Cubans from there, they know that it's all because of the regime, but they are starving to death. There's nothing there. So for this animal, because I don't even want to say his name, and yesterday I actually said something, people at all the marches, it's like when you say the Canel, Cingao son muchos, asesinos son poco. Right. I think that it's so important for us every time we hear that man's name to shout with everything that we have the word asesino, because that's what he is.
Explain what an asesino is in English.
A murderer. He's murdered countless assassin. Yeah.
Do you want to explain what a Cingao is?
Yeah.
Let me give a little bit more background, and then I want to ask you, because you're heading to Cuba right after this. By the time this drops next week, you'll probably be back, safe and sound. So the Cubans took to the streets protesting. For people that don't understand, protesting is illegal. There's no freedom of speech in this totalitarian regime. So for them to actually take to the streets is a huge sign of them being so fed up that they're willing to risk their lives, their safety, their freedom. Not that they had any freedom, but they might spend the rest of their days in jail if alive. Now, you were going back and you actually have family there. And I know that you were going back and forth with some people on Instagram talking about what's actually happening in Cuba. What is your family saying is happening in Cuba?
Well, before they cut off the internet, and they're jamming cell signals too, by the way, they were saying that the neighbors were gone. So they were pretty much saying that there's secret police. We all know about the neighborhood spies. So, the government is asking those people to crack down on folks that are demonstrating. They're taking young people. They took all the artists, by the way, that were out there doing music and Patria Vida and all that kind of stuff. Took them all in the night. They were hitting people over the head. I actually have a clip I was going to show you guys later of a secret, a secret police officer in Cuba hitting somebody with a stick, and then that guy, you know, catches himself, gets up, and hits the guy back, you know, and eventually gets away. But that's what they're doing. They're taking people at night, and you're absolutely right. The one thing about that is, let's say you and I don't get along. You haven't done anything, but I work for the government. Yeah, take him too. He did it too. There's no due process there. There's no, you know, let's go. They have courts, but we all know what it's about. So yeah, they're taking people in the night. They're taking people they think are leaders of this, you know, uprising, and they're trying to make, you know, they're trying to make them, you know, an example. So,
And how are you? Because we're taping
By
this.
the way,
before-
they started sentencing people already.
Yeah,
I
already.
know a girl that's looking at 10 years just for protesting.
just
Yeah.
for being on the streets.
the folks I know, they're saying 20 years. Who knows?
Let me go around a little bit. Kat, where were you born?
I was born in Miami.
Have you ever been to Cuba?
I've been to Cuba
Okay.
in 2017.
Okay, myself. We'll get to that a little later because I want our like our backgrounds and stuff. But what does this moment mean to you?
It's tragic. It's heartbreaking. I feel like I haven't slept in 4 days, and it's something that is very near and dear to me and my family's heart. I feel like I've stayed on socials just trying to get out as much information to everybody out there about what's going on in Cuba, because I feel like for all of us, the most important thing is to try to get more voices to be raised and people to speak up. Unfortunately, the internet is cut in Cuba, so the government is really trying to quiet the island and make sure that nobody knows what's going on so that people don't rise in anger and uproar to kind of come and try to save or help in any way. So I think that's the most important thing for us right now, is to continue to spread the message and get people involved as much as possible here in the States is all we can really do.
Yeah, and you guys have all been doing it. Henry, I've known Henry for years. You know, I consider him a good friend. I've never known you to be a political person, but in in the last year, especially with this Cuba thing, I think that I've seen that awakening in you a little bit, where you kind of feel that you're wearing the Patria Vida shirt, you're going out to the protest. What does this what does this mean for you as someone that was raised in Miami? And
I think growing up in Miami, there's also, I think for all of us that were born in Miami, Cuba was like another parent in a lot of ways. Like I don't know a day that went by that I didn't hear something about what life was like for my family before they fled, or what like the dream of Cuba was before they had to come to Miami and rebuild. And there was always a plan. My grandma like buried her valuables the day before they fled and fucking would tell, can I curse?
yeah,
And would tell me.
just not too much because it'll be beep 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 beep.
We already had Singal, so you can do whatever you want.
So fuck.
That's the worst.
They don't know what that means.
Would tell me and my cousins and my brother where exactly that shit was buried so that we could go dig it up when this was all over.
You're gonna share that with us, bro?
I'll let you guys know.
Because I'm literally,
Yeah. And bro, 62 years later, unfortunately, Castro outlived her and the regime outlived him, but I don't really care about her value. I mean, it'd be amazing to get, but like, there's an opportunity, I think, right now for the world to finally see what's going on in Cuba, and that just hasn't happened. I'm not a person that likes the internet or social media very much, but like, the beauty that Cuba now has a voice for the first time in 62 years is fucking incredible for me.
I think that's something that gets lost a lot. I think we talk a lot about 62 years. What's happening in Cuba right now, though, is in many ways unprecedented. And one of the reasons is internet access, right?
It's
Like,
never happened.
we saw this in other places around the world, like the Arab Spring, which, resulted in a variety of different outcomes. But the reason that people were able to communicate with one another is because they had internet capability, right? Like, and that is different than 10 years ago. It's different than 20 years ago, certainly. There were big protests in Cuba in 1994 during the special period, right? But like, they fizzled. Why? Because that information wasn't able to get off of the island. Now you have Cuban influencers, right? Like that's an amazing phenomena, and a connection to the outside world. So of course, the first thing the government does, let's interrupt the internet access. Makes a lot of sense. Let's go arrest influencers. There's literal video of a Spanish broadcaster interviewing a YouTuber, and the police come into her house while she's being interviewed.
multiples.
They're asking people to delete their social media accounts.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm working on is something called Amplificación Media Project, Cuba AMP, and we're screen recording everything that we find that looks like legitimately unedited material coming off of the island, and then subtitling it and putting it back out, because it's like, oh, this stuff is like gold, and to me that is the differentiating quality of this uprising, is that we have an opportunity to spread this globally through the use of social media, right? Like that, it's like we talk about keyboard warriors, right? But like in this instance, it might actually make a big difference.
Yeah.
I also wanted you to speak about, because a lot of times, being a Cuban-American that came here to LA, and a lot of people, especially out here, have a different perspective on the romantic aspect of the Cuban Revolution. And something I get, I had to get used to like seeing, people walking around in Che Guevara shirts and all that stuff. And I think, are we all liberal, or is there anybody here that considers themselves conservative? Jason, sometimes like, do you consider? I consider myself an independent.
Bro, honestly,
I don't want to get too deep in, because the point I'm trying to make is like, it's not like we're not like a bunch of super right. Although I'm happy if someone here.
I'm a leftist.
Okay,
like,
so
I don't have any problem saying that.
But here's the thing. I worked on the Hill. I worked in politics for years. It depends on what the issue is. Not everybody is one thing. I tend to be middle. I've been independent for 25 years. 25, maybe a little more than that. But on some things, I tend to lean a little left. On some things, I'm like, I tend to lean a little right. You can't define me by saying, am I liberal?
Well, no, here's the thing. I am with you. I'm that guy, okay? So I'm what you are. I've been independent for a long time. I don't believe in political parties. That's a whole nother show. But what I'm trying to say is, those of us that are liberal, when we came here and we're hanging out with other liberals who are not Cuban, and all they do is romanticize Che and romanticize Fidel. I'm going to start with you, especially because I think you might be the most liberal one, and you're the most Hollywood, let's be honest, Mr. Producer, okay? How do you communicate to your fellow liberals about what Cuba really is versus their romantic vision of it?
I mean, I think first of all, I think like these labels are overused and generalized. Like, I wouldn't consider myself a liberal, like Hillary Clinton to me is a liberal.
Okay. But you said you consider yourself a leftist.
A leftist, yeah. Which to me is different. I believe in progressive values. Leftism is I don't want to get too in the weeds, but it's complicated. Like, I'm not a Marxist-Leninist.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I see these red rose tankies online saying ridiculous things about the Cuban government, and it's wildly misinformed in my opinion, right? Like, so what I am is someone who believes that the working class and the poor in this country and in other places often don't have a voice. That's if I had to like focus my political ideology, it's on that. How we solve that is very complicated, right? Like, I'm also not a guy who believes we should nationalize every industry across the board, right? So we can get into those political conversations later, but the reason I say that I'm a leftist is because I think it's important for people to understand that not everyone on the left has like the same view of this situation or any of these political situations.
But have you had a harder time with the people who you typically resonate with politically when they characterize only the romantic aspects and social justice aspects of this communist revolution and don't realize the consequence is no freedom and everybody's broke?
To answer your question, yes, when those people are ignorant on the history.
Okay.
Right? Like, I also run into the same problem when I'm dealing with people on the far right who refuse to acknowledge things like the Monroe Doctrine.
And in Miami, we have to deal with all our right-wing primos and all that.
Yes, absolutely. And this is the constant debate that I have with them. I'm very adamant. I'm echoing, in fact, the sentiments of the people on the ground in Cuba when I say, this is not about el bloqueo. This is not about the embargo. This is what they're telling us, right? Like, I'm anti-embargo. This has nothing to do with that. This has to do with an authoritarian government where there's no plurality. Right.
There's only one party.
There's one party. It is run like a corporation, right? So you want to talk about leftism. There's a CEO. His name is Diaz-Canel. There's chairmen of the board. Raul Castro is the chairman, right? And you have jobs. One of the biggest threats that they use on the island, and this has been reported, is you work for the government? Well, if you say another thing, we're taking away your job. Yeah. Why is that meaningful? Because these people make $30 a month, right? So to take away their livelihood when you don't have family outside of the island, when you don't get remittances, right, is terrifying. So these are the kinds of complexities that the left needs to understand. Having a Leninist in office does not mean that they have an automatic mandate or a pass in some way.
There's more nuance.
There's more
And I think
nuance.
today in the United States with the polarization, like oh wait, that's our side of the aisle, this extreme, so I don't want to say anything bad but you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just think we're missing. So, look, we can't have a conversation about Cuba without talking about failed policies. Fidel, failed policy. Batista, the second time when he overthrew the government, failed policies. And guess what? We supported him, and initially we supported Fidel.
Yeah.
Right? Failed policy. The wealthy supported them both until Fidel took away stuff.
We support dictators all the
And we
time.
support dictators all the time. Nothing that happens in the Caribbean, in South America, anywhere north or south of the United States, happens without our government having a hand in it. And this is someone who served military intelligence many, many years. I'm not an expert, I'm not saying that, but I can tell you, I've been in many countries, nothing happens without our government knowing about it. And one last thing, it is not about the embargo, but it's a crutch. Fidel for 50-something years used the embargo as a crutch to keep his people blaming us. I've been there, I go there almost every year. Not for the government, to visit family. And now the younger folks, you're right, are saying, hey, this system sucks. You know, I want to go to medical school, but for what? If I can work at a hotel and make more money than I can being a doctor, right?
Because they spend 80% of their
There you
budget,
go.
of their existing budget
just
on
to let you know-
hotels.
but just to let you know, the embargo gives them a crutch to say, look, we can't get the medical supplies. And it's true. We have a medical journal from the U.S. says that the embargo, starting back in '92 when they squeezed it a little more, doesn't allow the necessary medicine and things to get in there. Here's the thing.
From U.S.
From anywhere. We have ships that circle the island. Really quick, and I'll read it to you. I have an excerpt. Here's the thing. I tell my people, let's protest. Let's talk about change we want. They get to decide what they want, though,
Correct.
on the island. But here's the thing. What's our outcome? What's the measurable outcome? The embargo has, not one person can tell me one good thing about the embargo. Not one person can tell me one good thing. Okay, Castro, when I talk to
It didn't
leftists-
work. I mean, like,
when I talk to the people that are leftists, believe me, we have them in the United States. They go, well, free education and free literacy. Yeah,
free education,
but
but
to
you don't get to
read
choose.
and be able to realize you can't do anything. Lastly, and I'll shut up.
Censor.
2008, our family in Miami protested that Obama was talking to Raul and doing all this thing. What did Obama do? Hey, we're gonna open up business with you. You got to give them internet. You got to open up internet access. You got to open up.
And that led
lines
to what's happening
And
now.
that led to what's happening now. Before because you go over there, only tourists could use internet, and they would cut you off. It'd be
And
slow.
it was $10 an
It was
hour.
10. Remember?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I started seeing my family on Facebook. That didn't happen before 2008.
Right.
I think we need to realize those old policies.
They didn't work. Let's be honest. 62 years. Because I went to Belen Jesuit Prep, which if you know what that school is, most people wouldn't. That's where
like
Fidel
school-
Castro.
It's School of the Americas, but in Miami.
Yeah, well, Fidel Castro went to Belen, the Jesuits. Then
Yeah.
when he became a secular atheist communist, took over the building, and all the priests went to Miami and started. So I was always against the embargo because as much as I want to free Cuba, I'm like, okay, but at the time it was like 40 years. It's like this isn't working. You're just helping Fidel isolate the country and consolidate his power. But I want to move away from the embargo unless you have something to say. I actually want to come to you about the conversation we were having before we started, Jason. About I asked who here has been to Cuba. Let me just do that one more time. Who here has been to Cuba? Okay, we've all been to Cuba. So I want to talk because you have a little different perspective on why you don't want to go back to Cuba, and go ahead and you know explain why it's so heartfelt for you.
Man, you know, it's so crazy to be experiencing all of this because for a long time, for me, it was always just stories, right? And my whole opinion on why I would never go to Cuba was based on these stories that my grandparents told me, and then my parents told me. You know, my father left Cuba when he was 26 years old, so you know that's 26 years of growing up in that, and it was everything we're seeing today. Like that was 26. He went through all of it. He got, you know, his head bashed in when he was 10 years old for trying to defend his dad, who was being taken in for having 2 pounds more of rice than what was allowed. My grandfather ended up being imprisoned for almost 2 years because of that. And you know, that was really where my dad as a kid understood what they were up against. And you know, but even then, like for me, it was always stories. And so out of respect to the suffering of my family, we just always, you know, agreed to not aportar, like not give absolutely anything to that government. You know, even like buying a fucking plane ticket for us was a slap in the face to my family. But you know, to see these videos that are surfacing in this last week, for the first time ever, like I've been able to actually put images, real images, to these stories that I grew up hearing. And as a first generation Cuban-American, like, I mean, bro, I don't even think it's a question. I think we should all, like without a doubt, be on the street doing what we're doing. And more so for me, it's listen, it would be a dream if the US would intervene, right? But the reality is that's probably not going to happen.
I don't know how I feel about that, man. I got to be honest with you. Like, how would you feel like, because you know, the mayor of Miami, Francis Suarez, says, yeah, they should go bomb, do airstrikes.
He's gonna
They're
bomb.
not.
He's gonna bomb them with
No,
his
they're
crypto
not.
money.
We can't.
Listen, I know they're not. Which is why I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
my purpose for being a part of, you know, the movement that we've all created together is more so because for the first time in all these years, we're seeing our people take to the streets like they did in '94, like they did, you know, and we're actually seeing it. Back then we couldn't see it, but now we're seeing it. And because of, you know, moves like what this guy did now, allowing food to come in, whatever, and these people being in a state to where they are literally starving to death, I think that there's a big chance that these people, because of, you know, the fear of seeing kids having their ears cut off, having their eyes poked with needles, having their fingers cut off in front of other kids, grabbing these kids, making them fight, you know, against their families, like that fear, along with the fact that now all of a sudden we're gonna be able to get all this food, all this medicine, they might retreat, they might go back into their homes and stop protesting.
That's what I'm afraid of,
And
that this is just going to be a blip.
Which is why I think it's so important for us to come together and taking advantage of the fact that there is, you know, we're seeing what they're doing, they're seeing what we're doing. If we create a big enough movement, man, I think that it's enough to inspire them to continue to be out on the street and to not settle for what they're being offered.
What's our call to
Because
action?
this is the time, you know, and
Right.
like, I mean, I don't know.
I have a slightly different, I agree with a lot of what you said. I have a slightly different take on it, which is I think for a long time we have centered, we being Cuban-Americans, have centered ourselves in sort of an equal part in terms of the struggle that's going on in Cuba. And I think we have an opportunity to do something different that our parents didn't do, which is center the Cuban people that are there,
Amen.
right?
Thank you.
And rather than thinking of ourselves as a source of inspiration for them, to think of ourselves as a point of amplification for them, right? To like look to them as the leader and go, what do you want us to do? I'm fortunate that I have friends who are very connected to the activist movement there, so I get to hear from them. And one of these women, Omara, who's an activist, who's here, who's left recently and is friends with him, she said the other day that it's like, this fight is like pushing a boulder, right?
Yeah.
It's not about, it's not toppling the government, right? It's like, it's this incessant need to apply pressure, right? And so there is this, I fear the blip, but there's a long game now that can happen because of social media. But I think in that long game, it's the Cuban government and it's the exile community who have been the loudest voices in this conversation for a long time. We have an opportunity to change that now and center these people of color, LGBT people, an artist-led movement, right? Many of them across the political spectrum. Dennis Solis, who likes to talk about Trump, you know, and then Luis Manuel Otero Alcantara, who says like, no, I'm not with that. You know what I mean? Like, so there's a pluralism, and that I think is what to me is exciting.
But we need to be careful, all right, because look, Black Lives Matter happened. A lot of folks in Miami, a lot of our gente, a lot of my family were like, oh no, esa gente.
But we shouldn't
right?
even give promotion to that
We
organization.
shouldn't do it. Look, they're in the streets. Oh my God, they supported the governor when he put that ban on, you know, on demonstrations. And what did you just see? Them
there's
blocking.
a moratorium on the ban.
Yeah. Now there's a moratorium. Now they're blocking the freeway. Now what happened with the Mexico? Yeah, build the wall. Oh yeah, don't let those people come in. Oh, but let our people come in. You know, let our people go. But don't let those people come. And then we want Mexican people, Mexican-Americans, to say, oh, let's go with the Cubans. And here's my thing. You're right. It's about them, not us. And earlier when we were talking, I was saying that every time you talk about Cuba in the U.S., it automatically the conversation gets taken over by our family in Miami. Like they are the ones that control that conversation, right? You know, you have a different of opinion.
And just some background, he's the one that was born in New York. The rest of us are from Miami, so you're go ahead.
Born in New York, I have family in Miami. I'm a family. That's another thing. Yeah, I was born in New York. There's a big Cuban population in New York. They're in New Jersey now. They're the second largest.
But you feel the Miami voice is dominating because we consolidated and we're the loudest.
Just saying over the people in Cuba.
It's over. Yeah, because it's always about, hey, this was what happened to us. My grandma. Okay, let me tell you. So my family, just so you know, my mom is like halal, so my family is white and black. You know, I come from Cuba's multiracial. A lot of people don't know that. Right?
I've done my genealogy report. I'm 5%.
I got family like this that are first cousins. My mom's sister Celia is, she dyed her hair blonde. She looks just, you wouldn't even know, right? So my thing, and I love them all, but the treatment is different. We all know it, right? I was telling you before.
We can say it out loud. Mejorar la raza.
Yeah, mejorar la raza. Or they used to tell me when I was a little kid, and I go to Miami and play, oye, no te pongan el sol mucho, te va a poner oscuro, right? Don't get too dark. And they always used to, and I was like, what does that mean? But when you go to New York and Jersey, I didn't hear that kind of stuff, right? And I saw more people like me, like us, that do, and it wasn't hostile, right? And so when we talk about Cuba, and you're in Miami, let's face it, it becomes groupthink. The folks that come there, you get, hey, oye, watch out for them, live over here. My family, what they do, we sponsored them to come here, right? What they do, we said, hey, we're gonna move you out here, we're gonna get you a job, education. They stayed in Hialeah because they were told, don't come to LA, you know.
But I want to need Hialeah, bro.
Listen,
1925.
Mira. I love. I told you, I'm serious. I love my people.
I know. I'm just messing with you.
It hurts me, man. It hurts me to hear these things. It hurts me as to go in a Toys R Us and have them follow me around, and then when my mom says,
but you don't think it's because you look a little like Common?
You know, maybe. And then when my mom says, "¿Qué pasa?" Oh, you Cuban, the Cubana. Ah, you should have said, because you know those people, they separate us. See, now they're talking about those people. So what I'm saying is, when we have something like this, and then we try to unify folks, hey, Americans, hey, Mexicans, hey, other Latinos, Venezuelans, what happened? Trump didn't do anything. And when our people in Miami, they weren't in the streets. They were like, hey, listen to Trump, right?
Wait, you're saying that in Miami they weren't in the streets?
For Venezuela?
Cubans, bro. Yeah, I know
listen,
thousands.
Listen,
like,
right, the ones that probably didn't support him, but the ones that were, the ones that were rooting for the wall, the ones that were saying, hey, it's not our problem. The ones that were saying, Black Lives Matter, oh, come on, Governor, do something about these people.
I hear you, but I also don't know if they're
not
relevant
all.
Right now.
Listen, not all. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. There's a growing, like us, the older folks. My grandparents are gone. My parents are older. I lost my dad last year. Sorry. It's okay. But those folks that had that mentality that we control what is said about Cuba, because we're the ones that suffered the most. Not us, because we weren't born there, even though, I don't know, I was there a year, I don't remember. But not us, right?
But can I talk? Can I get a little complicated right now? I'm gonna want you to chime in on this, because I think we're all supporters of the Black Lives Matter and the police brutality that happens disproportionately to people that are black and brown. But the organization recently put out support for the Cuban regime.
I know.
And I wasn't surprised, because I do understand that the two people that started it, they're openly Marxists, and so it gets a little complicated. I know your brother. I want to ask you about this. Your brother posted something on Instagram talking about how he was a supporter of Black Lives Matter, the organization, and protested with him. I did too, but he was disappointed in the official remarks that they put out. So you can go ahead and speak to that. As controversial as what you're about to say is probably going to be, go ahead.
I mean, bro, I think that we all were surprised to a certain extent at what they said, considering the facts and everything that we're seeing. It really broke my heart, man, when I realized, I felt so fooled because, and maybe it's from lack of, It's a mistake that I made in not doing the research, because even yesterday I was looking at.
But maybe
tweets.
they haven't done the research. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that they don't understand what's going on.
I feel like they
Your
do.
audience,
Yeah,
you
go
might
ahead.
wanna update
So
because
basically,
they made a response.
okay. So wait, they made a response to the response.
They made a response to. Well, see,
Go ahead and explain then,
there-
because you
there
probably
is-
read the most
There
update.
are factions of Black Lives Matter, right?
Right.
So that we all know it's not like.
And there's a movement that is
There's
not
a
part of the
movement
organization.
that's not part
I'm
of the-
part of the movement. I'm
And
not part of the
chapters.
organization.
There's
Local
chapters,
chapters.
there's local chapters. It's not like one building and okay, we all work there. And other factions have come out and said we don't support what is happening to the people in Cuba. Not 100%. I saw it earlier. I'll pull it up and
Right.
show it to you.
I think
Let
what
me-
infuriated
I think
people
it-
even more was her response.
Her response. Yeah, I know, but let me. Can I just say?
Who's? What's the name?
Patrice Colors?
What is it?
Alicia Garza.
Alicia.
Can I say
Yeah, go
something
ahead.
to whoever is black?
Please, by all
whoever
means.
is black, as the only black person here. Fidel was not good. He didn't help black people. It was a pissing match between him and the U.S. So he said, let me piss the U.S. off some more. Hey, if you're Shakur, come on over. Hey, black people, come on over. It was all to stick his thumb, his nose
Right.
at the U.S. government and to piss off the Cubans in Miami. He didn't like it. I told everybody, if you think Fidel was so great, go look at his record. Look at the black people in Cuba. Who is elevated in Cuba?
No,
what black
right.
person
Yeah.
do you see running
Yeah.
anything
Look
in
at photos
Cuba?
of the parliament. Look
wait,
up Google
yeah.
photos of the parliament.
Photos of the parliament. No black people. None. Look who runs tourism. Look who runs everything in Cuba. So I tell black people, what are you talking about? Like, because they think romanticizing. Oh man, Fidel. He didn't listen. He did it all to piss off U.S. Anything
For
he
power.
could do, to stick it to the folks in Miami, to stick it to the U.S. He did, and he knew that we were having before '64 that we had Jim Crow, and he knew
Right.
that hey, a lot of them wanted that in Cuba, and he knew that.
They're exploiting it.
Yeah.
One thing I want to bring it back to the
wasn't
artist. I think the seeds for what's happening today was actually set back in February when Gente de Zona and Orishas collaborated. These are Afro-Cuban artists who were born and lived in Cuba,
Yeah.
and they've had to early on in their lives be supportive of the regime. And now that they've been able to be separate from it, they're living in their states. They put out this song called Patria y Vida,
Patria y Vida.
which is a play on patria o muerte. So it used to be the Cuban communist regime would say country or death, and these artists came out with a track that says, how about country and life? So I'm gonna bring it back to you because you're doing music. I feel that for this to have like some momentum that lasts longer, artists have definitely got to be involved. Like when you saw the song Patria y Vida and you saw them, and I'm sure you're familiar with Gente de Zona and Orishas, and how'd you feel about them making an impact?
Yeah,
with
when they
their
put
music?
out the song, I remember hearing it about 5 months ago, and I thought, finally, people are making music about what's going on in Cuba. It's really frustrating as a Cuban. You hear all this amazing Latin music explosion, but people not talking about what's actually happening on the island. And I'm always encouraging young Cuban artists to maybe make music that talks about the plight of the black market. People are just living off of the black market in Cuba. It's a tough life. Finally, this song comes out, and I thought this was amazing. I know Yotuel, we've worked together. And then that's when I started finding out that it was actually gaining traction in Cuba, and so much traction that the government decided that anybody that was caught listening to this song was actually going to be jailed.
Wow.
So they confiscated people listening to the song, but of course in Cuba everything is black market. Everybody finds a way to spread stuff to each other, whether it's food, whether it's clothes, whatever.
They saw Game of Thrones before we did. Yeah, we did it. I was there. They were like, "Oh, yo vi todo el Juego de Tronos."
So when this song started spreading kind of like wildfire, it did become kind of like the internet becomes knowledge for them. Music becomes like inspiration, and it does incite a fire in people.
And almost give them permission, because these are like these are the artists that we respect and we like, because politicians you can't trust, but like if you have an artist that you resonate with.
And when you hear poetry and musical poetry that speaks to you as a Cuban that's actually living there, and you finally hear the words being said out loud in music, it is something that can really grab you. Just like we know, I mean, songs all the time, they're like spells because they're repeated over and over. Just like the indoctrinating that they're doing now, like the Cuban regime, in a very brutal way, and they're like showing young kids they're slicing ears off and showing these young kids, making the young kids do it to their own people. They're indoctrinating them in a way.
Wait,
right?
this really is happening? The slice?
100%.
It's
They're
literally
lining
happening.
them up. They're putting them like they're taking them. They're lining them up in a hallway, and then one by
They're
one
forcing
they'll
young
slice an
kids.
ear, and they'll say either turn yourself, join us, or this is what happens. And they're cutting their fingers off in front of each other.
And they're making them do it to them.
This is happening now?
Yeah, this is happening now.
Don't it?
in Cuba, like with the kids that are missing and stuff. I have the video here. I have a video that
We
I'll
can
show you
show
guys
that.
of the people talking about it.
Sam, we're
Yeah.
gonna have to get all these videos after and implement. That is insane.
So the music is like a spell in that sense, but this one's a positive one, an empowering one, right?
How'd you feel when you went to Cuba? Like when
I
you
felt
read
I felt very split because there was a part of me that really wanted to go because this is an island that like I feel like I've had in my blood since I was born in Miami, but I never got to see, and I hate having that power taken away from me. When we got the chance to go, of course my grandma was like, I'm not fucking, nobody wanted to go, of course. Of course my American girlfriends wanted to plan a trip, and I went. And I got to see the city of Havana. I got to go to the countryside.
How'd you feel when you breathed the air? That humid air that's almost like Miami, but not quite?
Almost like Miami, but not
trucks.
quite. I
The
mean,
fumes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the fumes when you're driving the cars for sure. The fumes when you're
Yeah, I
driving the
didn't
cars
feel
for
really
sure.
good about that.
It was magical. It was very sad. It was emotional. It was
Mixed feelings the entire
very
time.
mixed feelings the entire time. And mind you, I'm with a lot of my American girlfriends who were just like, you know, enjoying the
That must have
place.
been
But
tough.
it was very tough. It was very tough. I mean, we ended up making a lot of friends on the island, and we would feed them, bring them to restaurants with us, and they were always kind of scared, you know, because they know that other Cubans are looking at them because for fear of like a Cuban outing them.
Right.
A lot of the Cubans that we were hanging out with and befriending and bringing to the restaurants to feed had never tried the certain fishes that they ordered, or lobster, any of the things that they catch for us. You know, the tourists.
Well, because if they
they've
catch
never
them eating
eaten.
it, they'll go to jail.
Oh, yeah, and none of them have tried it, you know? I mean, I remember a couple of the friends we made came to our Airbnb, which was also very, like, touch and go. And the Airbnb had, like, snacks for us in a bowl, like little crackers. And they were like, this is just here? This is just food to have? And we're like, yeah. They're like, can we eat this? I was like, take everything, you know what I mean? I mean, that was the experience. It was extremely sad. It was incredible to see and watch and be on that island that I feel like is in my heart. But absolutely, I do agree that the embargo is just, honestly, lifting the embargo is just putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. I think that it's like giving somebody Tylenol that has COVID and expecting it to be cured.
Yeah, interesting. Jason, you're very passionate. So for the one guy that hasn't gone to Cuba because, you know, you feel that it's a slap in the face to your parents and your grandparents, and I completely understand because I had to deal with that too. But where did you find your passion? Because I got a lot of friends in Miami that are Cubans that went to school with me, and they kind of care. They kind of say they're Cuban, but it's all really about the pastelito de guayaba and the salsa. Other than that, they really don't understand what it means to be Cuban. But I see a passion in you. When was that instilled?
Bro, the first song I ever learned as a kid was a song that my dad wrote called Veneno Pa'l Veneno. And it was, I mean, I don't remember every lyric of the song because the last time I sang it, I was probably like 7 years old, but like there's just parts of it that like, the reason why I say it is that my dad is very proud of his Cuban roots, you know? I mean, he left when he was 26, and like him and my mom left when she was 10, so she was younger. She's more Americanized than he is. He's in Hialeah, never learned English, which is a big part of why, you know, I think we're so in tune with our roots. I mean, to this day, like I always say, man, I'm 100% American, right? I was born in America, but I grew up in a Spanish household. I still, to this day, when I go home, I only speak Spanish. So I am 100% Hispanic, Latino. Like, I feel that. You know, people ask me where I'm from, I say Cuba. I mean, and then, you know, my wife or someone will be like, oh no, he's from Hialeah, but whatever. Like I say Cuba, like Cuban, because I feel it. It's in my blood. Like, you know, like she just said, like that island, I carry it in my heart every step I take. The stories, my grandparents, you know, as a kid, it was all they talked about. Like he said, like there's not a day that went by where like you didn't hear about what Cuba was or what the dream is. And so like, and he said something very interesting because I don't want my message to be misconstrued in the sense that like, you know, how important I feel it is for us to be out on the streets, you know, like had I been born on that island, man, the way that I am, the way that I, like the hothead that I could be sometimes and just the passion, drive that I have, there's a big chance that I would be out on the streets protesting, and a big chance that I would probably be, incarcerated, or that I would be tortured, or that I would be fucking killed for doing that. So, I go out to the streets now to chant for freedom for them, and just like I did for my black brothers and sisters when, they took to the streets, and like I did with Venezuela, and like I did with Nicaragua, and like I'll continue to do for all those people, because for me, it's just about, the equal liberty and freedom and equality for all of us, and so like, but I agree with what you said in the sense that like, I think that, making sure that the focus is in amping up the voices of them, I think that is really an incredible way to look at it. And I think that if we could all somehow come together and figure out an efficient way to do that, I think it will be incredible.
If we could be their megaphone.
Exactly.
Basically.
And I think that's what can actually bring us all together, right? Like, I actually oftentimes have more problems with people who are sort of the like limousine liberals, let's go party in Cuba people, than like my right-wing parents, because at least my right-wing parents have ideological coherence, right? Like they believe what they believe. And so like with this though, it's so easy. I post something about Cuba Amp or whatever it is, and my dad is like, he just figured out how to use the reactions on Instagram, so he reacts to every post, and he put like 100 heart emoji,
fire,
like, thumbs up, fire.
He sends all of them.
And I'm like, this is a thing that everyone can get behind, because we all agree, whatever you think the U.S. policy should be or what should happen, we all agree the people on the street, right, for the most part, those people should have the greatest voice.
100%.
I want you to talk about, we were going to have another guest that maybe I can Zoom with her at another time, that she was part of the how do you say it? The
Movimiento San Isidro movement?
Yeah, because so people, there's a disconnect with non-Cuban Latinos and even non-Latinos about how free Cuba is. Just to show you how not free Cuba is, they passed a decree several years ago saying that any art had to be authorized by the government, meaning the government can say, no, that's not, so to tell artists that they can't, it's the ultimate censorship. And this movement, explain this movement a little bit.
Yeah, to touch on that quickly, I think something that's often missed with Cuba is that a lot of the things that go on have to do with business, right? Like, so Cuban artists started making a substantial amount of money with their art, right? And they were expressing themselves. And so the Cuban government wanted their pound of flesh, right? And that one of their ways of ensuring that not only they get that, but that also the message, when you're making art that's subversive and that's making its way out of the country, it's a bad look for you, right? So yes, they passed this decree. And I would say, we talked about Yotuel and, Patria Vida. What led to that was this group of artists called Movimiento San Isidro. Almost, I would say it's majority black or mixed race. A lot of LGBTQ folks, a lot of women. They have started with a very vocal protest about this one contained issue, right? Like, I want to be able to have my paintings and express myself how I want. And they were met with absolute repression. Incarcerated, disappeared, people didn't know where they were for months. This is months, not like months. And this has been building until they are in a position now where they've sort of been, and it's a coalition, right? Like, just like we were talking about, most of them are left-leaning but democratic. There's centrists and there's a few right-wingers, right? And these folks, but what they have in common is that they are the voice of the people there on the island. They're the artists who are putting together the messaging, right? Like Luis Manuel Otero Alcántara, who I was talking about, he went on a hunger strike where he strapped himself to a chair, and their response was to do what they literally have done to people like Gandhi and force feed him, so that they took him to a hospital, disconnected him from everybody else, and force fed him because his protest was effective, right? Mm-hmm. And then they tell you, oh, it's for his own good, it's for his health, right? So this is what people need to understand is happening. And I think if we just tell these people's stories, so yes, this group in Miami, they're basically 4 people. 3 of them are recently arrived Cubans. There's only one Cuban-American, which is my friend Leanne Russell. And they're not just in contact, they're not like the Movimiento San Isidro people, but they're people who are leading the charge of trying to amplify groups like Movimiento San Isidro, and others who are there doing this grassroots work.
And
right?
I do really quick, I do want to say that, because when I was there with Chocolate, you know, it's so, and there were people in Cuba, and you're right, there was youth, a lot of mix, definitely a lot of black, negro cubano, that were talking about what was going on in Cuba, and they were getting arrested when I was there. I was literally seeing them trying to hide, trying to go to Santiago, trying to figure out a way to go, you know, hiding in El Cerro, because the police heard their music, the government, and they were coming to get them. So, you know,
Let me ask you, let's say this picks up momentum and change does happen in Cuba and they relent and they allow opposition parties, maybe a little bit more room, and change actually happens in Cuba. And what I thought was going to happen during the Obama administration when I went there, I thought Cuban-Americans were going to start going into Cuba and we were going to start meeting and fucking coming face to face, which did happen to a small degree. But let's say change happens in Cuba, it opens up, and we all start heading back there, what happens? What happens between the Cubans that stayed and los gusanos, or los hijos de los gusanos that we are?
So let's define freedom first.
Yeah.
I don't know when Cuba has been free. No one can tell me. The people, okay, and I'm not talking about the Taínos or the Clavo. I'm talking about the people. Even when, before, you know, when Batista was there.
People were disappearing.
People were
But
disappearing.
what happens if we get freedom for the first time?
But
Are we two separate people at this point?
I just don't know, and that's, I need to understand what that means, freedom, because I don't know.
Freedom to or freedom from?
Right. Is it because
little bit of
they,
both?
when I talk to people there, they're afraid of our system. They don't.
Why?
They,
Why?
Because what they see is
Because people go bankrupt for medical bills.
Yeah.
they see their family go and then go bankrupt and lose everything, and then they go, oh, because it's all about you got to have money and it's everything's expensive, and they have anxiety, and not fear, anxiety.
Also, it's years of just being used to doing absolutely nothing and being able to get by because you're given just enough.
Just enough.
You know what I mean? Just enough to survive. And so like
Until this past year.
yeah, until this past year. So even then, like I personally, if it were just to end abruptly today, I think that would be horrible. I think that we would see everybody just
We see
lose
drugs,
their
we
shit
see
and
cartels.
and there would be no, because it just can't happen like that in a day. I mean, you're talking about 62 years of people have to. There's got to be some sort of like
A vision. I agree with Humberto. Like
strategy.
what is the next step? And I agree that we should be listening and amplifying the voices of the people in Cuba, but I wonder if they do even know anything else besides what their current state has been for the last 62 years.
They've been so scared. Like when I went to Cuba, I noticed they were scared of the outside world. You know what I'm saying? Like that was beat into them.
I got the vibe they were scared to speak about it.
Yeah, they were.
It
Yeah,
wasn't that like you don't feel these things or
Yeah.
it was the streets have ears.
That's the
which-
thing. That's a
Cubans in
sign.
Cuba whisper. In Miami, we grew up around a bunch of loudmouths screaming
we were
everything.
getting
But this is
yanked
a
out of
sign.
our houses.
They'd say cuidado because this.
Yeah.
And this used
La
to be.
bamba.
Esto.
Yeah. But
I had
that
a-
doesn't just mean him. That means the secret. You know, hey, cuidado.
Wait, pointing at him with his beard?
No. They would. You know.
No, but la barba.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing.
They're
a saying
afraid to
there.
say
The streets have ears is a
Fidel's
like,
name or
common.
And by the
saying.
way, when you go and you're like, oh my God, the Cuban people, they're beautiful. Dog, you are how their bread is buttered. Like, you played yourself. Like, I went and met with them and they gave me the same, like, mira, Cuba, da da da, for like 15 minutes. And I just kept talking to them in Spanish with a Cuban accent. And 30 minutes in, they're like, déjame decirte la mierda que. And one lady who was like doing her song and dance was like, mira, la famosa libreta. Pa! And slapped me with the rations
La
book,
libreta.
right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
the vibe changes. So you got to understand the Cuba that you're seeing when you're there as a tourist. Even if you stay in the Paladares and all that, there's a layer, right? There's a, what do they call it? There's like a double speak. What is it?
Oh, yeah.
La doble
La
moral.
doble sentido, yeah.
El doble sentido.
Sentido, I think.
No, there's
no,
like,
no, it's not that.
There's like
I
an
know what you mean.
ideology where basically they have to pronounce one ideology that's
Right.
coherent while carrying another one
Yeah.
underneath it at all times. And it's imagine the anxiety that provokes.
Can I just? It's important to, just really quick. It's important to support the Cubans. It's important in Cuba. It's important to give them tools so that they can decide what they want. It's important for us to kind of get a coherent message.
Yeah.
You got people on one side, you got people other, you got people blocking freeways, streets, you know, but what's our message to our government? What are we saying? What are we asking for, right?
Sure.
Okay, first of all, people, we're not sending the Army, the military, Marines. They're not going there because in Russia, they got weapons.
Proxy war with
We're
Russia.
not doing it. We're not. It's
not gonna happen.
Right, it's not going to happen. So we have to look at diplomacy, right? But there, you know, we have to, you're right. We have to give them tools so that they can decide how they want to live. And my fear, and a lot of my family's fear there, is that you're right. If it opens up, then it becomes like Mexico, you know, cartels hanging people from the freeway bridges, you know, because those folks that work for the government, if it opens up, what do you think they're going to do? They already have privilege. They already have access to weapons. They already have, you know, they're just going rounding people up.
My government cousins live in Miramar,
Yeah.
have air conditioning,
Yeah.
a big house,
Yeah,
and a
they-
private driver. My cousins that don't work for the government live in Víbora and Santiago, Las Vegas, and everything is por la izquierda.
I'm
Hustling
curious
everybody.
My aunt is a maid of mine.
if there was a, I'm just curious what everybody thinks. If there was a magic wand and we could make Cuba exactly what we want it to be, what would it be?
Costa Rica.
And
Costa
if and if there was no proxy war with Russia that was at stake.
I would just want the Cuban people to have self-determination. If they make mistakes, let them make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Our country is vastly imperfect, you know? But it's like, you know, my dad is always like, you want it to be the Soviet Union or China? I'm like, I would settle for Sweden. You know what I mean? Like I think that what's
Canada.
important to me is that I feel like the people, there's a class system in Cuba still. There's an oppressor, and I lament that the people are not able to argue and come up with an imperfect solution to their problem. Like that, I want them to have the chance to fuck up, and they don't even have that.
Even
chance.
just an election, just elect the wrong person, and like, at least you elected them.
At least.
Yeah.
But
And
that
any
hasn't
party,
happened since
of any
Because
1940
then you have to
something.
speak to the voter, yeah.
And again, we still have to address racism. I mean, that's something that
100%.
our families here and our families there act like, oh, not Cuba. And we all know that it's like me, you know, it's like if you would say, hey, we have a problem with rape culture, right? And then me telling you, Chica, that didn't happen. You're crazy. And we're all telling you that didn't happen. You're crazy. And you're like, no, I'm not crazy.
You were asking for it.
You know what I'm saying? I think that you're right. I think there's a lot of things that need to be addressed. I think we need to address ourselves here, because I have family, and I'm sure you all have, that always had the inclination, as soon as it opens up, I'm going back, voy a reclamar, tengo mi casa. How are you going to reclaim a house that 4 generations of families were born in that house? What are you going to do? Hey, get out.
That's where it's definitely gonna messy.
You know what I
Jason,
mean?
You wanna
Actually, I would love to read. I don't know how much longer we're gonna be here, but I would love to read a message that my
go ahead.
that my
We're
dad-
wrapping up, so we're gonna before you do that. You great question. Thank you very much for being co-moderator. Did you want to explain what you would do with to answer your own question?
Oh,
If you had a magic wand,
if I had a magic wand, I would love it to look like Costa Rica. I mean, that would be incredible.
I still wouldn't mind Cuba having an army. I know that that's kind of weird and counterintuitive, but like my people need some.
We're
guns.
bad with guns.
No, I say
Only
you-
because we've
last
never
time
been
we
able to
had
have
guns.
them.
Oh man, Henry, what would your magic wand look like?
Free elections.
I think that's a basis.
yeah,
Free
that's
speech.
the
I think
start,
free
bro.
speech is so important. A lot of people in the United States, they don't realize how important it is, but free speech is very important. So we're gonna end off on Jason. Go ahead and talk to us and read what you have.
So I woke up today with a message from my father, and it says a little something like this. I hope I don't butcher it. Let's see.
Do you want to do it in English or in Spanish?
No, you can do both, or you do it however it's written. This is a
I'll do it in
bilingual audience.
Spanish, and then I can. Okay.
Wait, you also wrote a translation?
I did the whole little Google translation, but que
I don't trust Google.
Yeah,
This
you-
is a bilingual audience. If our fellow Latinos can't understand it, then
Just put subtitles. That's,
Oh, true.
you could add that in, right?
Sí.
I'm
check
editing
it
this
out.
myself. Forgive me, I'm still working.
11 de julio. Estamos y estaremos luchando desde Cuba, así también en el exilio, en todo el mundo, hasta que recuperemos nuestra soberanía, condiciones sociales para nuestro pueblo y todos sus derechos. If you guys want, do you want to translate that part? Or no?
Go ahead and translate that one part, but say the rest in Spanish because we have a
I'm
bilingual.
going to say the whole thing.
Okay.
Esta revolución dictatorial es y será el ejemplo más real y perfecto de la violación de todos los derechos humanos. La única salida y solución que ha tenido la fracasada revolución castrista en estos 62 años es empujar a nuestro pueblo a un exilio donde gran parte de nuestros hermanos han muerto en el intento. Este 11 de julio del 2021
ha sido la fecha más esperada y deseada por los cubanos y por todos nuestros hermanos latinoamericanos que se han unido a nuestra lucha y nuestras plegarias durante estos pasados 62 años. Hoy escribo con la sangre de mis abuelos, de mis padres y la mía propia, para decirles a la tiranía castrista que le ganamos. Han pasado más de 6 décadas y lleno de orgullo, y pase lo que pase, les grito que les ganamos, porque los jóvenes que nacieron dentro de la revolución están en las calles de Cuba gritándole asesinos al régimen, que los ha estado adoctrinando desde que nacieron, y nosotros, los viejos del exilio, que hemos tenido la dicha de ver lo que está pasando en nuestra querida Cuba, en honor a nuestros abuelos y padres, estamos dando saltos de orgullo, pues todos hicimos un gran trabajo al pasarle la antorcha del grito de libertad para nuestra patria a nuestros hijos, que desde este 11 de julio han estado en las calles de todo el mundo unidos en un solo grito de libertad para nuestra Cuba. Te ganamos, Fidel, y le ganamos a todos los tuyos. Hoy los hijos tuyos están escondidos y avergonzados, mientras que los nuestros están en las calles defendiendo sus raíces y gritándole que su revolución, a la que le quedan muy pocos días de existencia, fue, es y será hasta el último minuto que dure un fracaso. Es por eso que ya están y estás condenado, como uno de los dictadores más sanguinarios de su propio pueblo. Jamás la historia te absolverá.
Wow.
And that last line, you guys know about the
Fidel
book.
Castro said, "History will absolve me."
Yeah.
And that last line is saying, no.
And then he says, soy un exiliado, Heriberto Canela.
That's beautiful,
So, yeah.
man. Well, that pass it on to your dad. That was amazing.
Thank you, bro.
Guys, I want to thank you guys for coming here. We put this together last minute, and we all feel the gravity of the moment. I think this is bringing the Cuban-American community together. We're putting aside racial issues and political issues and finding that unifying thing, and we can still talk about our differences. And I honor the fact that you guys all came here and took part in this. Thank you so much. And to our audience, thanks for watching and listening, and I hope you support the Cuban people. Cuba Libre y Patria y Vida. Gracias.